western region of Namibia is almost without exception arid land. From the northern border with Angola to its southern limits, the landscape barely changes. Dunes, sand and stones take up an area of over 250,000 square kilometers, more than 1/3 of the entire country. This is the oldest desert in the world, a dry region where 14 years may go by without a single drop of rain falling. An unforgiving landscape where nature demonstrates the extent to which animals and plants are able to adapt and conquer one of the most extreme ecosystems on the planet, the Namib Desert. To the south of the Quiseb River, which flows into the Atlantic after crossing the desert, lies the National Park of Namib Naukluft, an immense sea of land stretching right to the coast with dunes up to 300 meters high. Within this desert, beneath the monumental pyramids of sand, one of the largest diamond deposits in the world can be found, carried here 1 million years ago from South Africa by the waters of the Orange River. Hidden between the coast and the dunes, the Namib contains another very different natural treasure. At the northernmost point of the park, protected by the desert, lies the Bay of Sandwich. Beneath the burning sun, life flourishes in the lagoon of brackish waters, a mixture of seawater and the fresh water that emerges from under the dunes. A colony of flamingos has here found the shelter they need to raise their young. The waters are rich in algae and crustaceans, and the sea influences the temperature. In the desert, the difference in temperature in the course of a single day can be 20 degrees centigrade, while here it never varies more than 6 degrees. Although the flamingos can withstand temperatures as high as 68 degrees centigrade and as low as 30 degrees below zero, other species in the bay are not as resistant and would die in such extreme conditions. The rich life along these coasts is due to the Benguela Sea current, which paradoxically originates in the freezing waters of the Antarctic Ocean. From there it flows north beneath the warm Atlantic waters, eventually reaching the west coast of Africa. The continental landmass forces these waters rich in nutrients to the surface, and the coasts swarm with phytoplankton and zooplankton, a natural paradise for fish and for the many birds which, like these avocets, feed in the waters of the bay. Many species feed on the plankton and the fish, but the flamingo is perhaps the most sophisticated in the way it extracts nutrition from the water. Its feet stir up the sea bottom, while the thousands of tiny plaques along its beak filter the water, in some species up to 20 times a second. At the side of the lagoon, like a protective wall, the desert dunes rise up. This is the most inhospitable landscape in the Namib. No predator would dare cross it on land. They would certainly die. Nonetheless, the flamingos are always instinctively on the alert, and at the slightest hint of danger, will fly up to the safety of the air. The dunes represent the greatest challenge to life in the desert. The sands don't retain water, and there is only a bare minimum of nutrients available for plant life. Moreover, the winds constantly blow, moving the dunes in a ceaseless migration across the lonely desert. Life would seem to be impossible here. The constant movement of the dunes prevents vegetation from taking hold along the unstable slopes. But even here, plants have found a place in which they can gain a foothold. In these small plains, surrounded by dunes, bushes and small trees are able to grow. On solid ground, they can grow and reproduce, releasing seeds which will be carried away by the wind. All around, the threatening dunes continue their slow advance, blown by the wind. The landscape is constantly changing. New plains appear. Old ones are buried in the sand. The desert swallows up the vegetation, but the seeds have already been dispersed, and life will duly appear in another part of the Namib. Vegetation needs water in order to live, and here it seldom rains. Fortunately, in the area of the desert closest to the coast, mist descends almost weekly, and this is virtually the only source of water in these bone-dry lands. When it is misty, water runs down the trunk and the leaves into the ground, and is then absorbed by the roots closest to the surface. Mist brings 50 liters of water per square meter per year, double the amount of rain. The rocky plains further into the desert do not even receive the benefit of the mists, and vegetation here has had to find other ways to survive. Apparently, only lichen has been able to withstand this test. There would seem to be no grass, but shortly after the first rain, grass does indeed grow. The seeds had lain hidden beneath the ground. They rapidly soak up the water, then germinate and complete their life cycle in some cases in just 6 weeks. Then they dry up and die, leaving behind the seeds, which can remain dormant for years, patiently waiting for the next rainfall. Not all plants have such a short life. Some, like this curiously named African splurge, can remain green for many years, though in order to do so, it has to evolve without leaves. Too much water would be lost through them, and so they have been converted into thorns. The chlorophyll is contained in the trunk. However, not all plants have had to give up their leaves. In fact, on the sandy plains in the north and the east, we find the plant with the longest leaves in the world. The welwitschia has just 2 leaves which grow continuously throughout its life and can reach 18 meters in length. In order to reduce transpiration, they close their stomae during the hottest part of the day. At night, however, they keep them open in order to absorb the dew and then channel it down to the ground, where the efficient root will make sure none is lost. Some desert plants have not only been able to keep their leaves like the welwitschia, but can grow up to heights of up to 9 meters in defiance of the scorching winds of the Namib. This is the aloe or quiver tree. It stores water in the spongy pulp inside its trunk and branches. To combat the heat, it covers its bark with a white waxy secretion which reflects the rays of the sun and at the same time prevents water loss. The leaves grow in clusters at the end of the branches. When there is extreme drought, the aloe can lose one or more of these clusters and so reduce water loss. The branch with its store of water, however, remains. The sparse vegetation and the lack of water mean that this region is totally inaccessible for most animals, and any that do stray too far into the desert are almost certain to die. Here, along the Namibian escarpment at the western edges of the desert, the climate improves and it occasionally rains. Herbivores can find pasture, and there is always a pool somewhere where they can replenish their water reserves. The two basic necessities are met, and so here, life has a chance. Most of the large herbivores of the African savannas can be found here. Some come in search of the grass that grows when there has been rain, and others, like the giraffe, prefer the young leaves on the trees. The fact that there is so much life here at the very edge of the desert may seem surprising and a sharp contrast to the barren, lifeless lands just 50 kilometers to the west. But the lack of water places strict limits on the majority of animals in the Namib. Some species, like the oryx, can remain for some time in the desert, surviving by licking the night dew and eating leaves and plants which contain water. But the majority would simply die if they penetrated far into the desert. Death also lies waiting at the other edge of the desert on the west coast. Bad weather, winds, and the deceptive currents have, over the years, caused many shipwrecks along this coast. The sailors, drawing up their maps, recorded the fear this coast inspired. They named it the Skeleton Coast. Despite appearances, death is not the only visitor to this area of the Namib. These bodies are evidence that this is one of the many beaches along the coast of West Africa to which the fur seals come every year to give birth. There may be over 1 million seals along the coast as a whole. This concentration of valuable furs did not go unnoticed for long, and by the end of the 18th century, seal hunters were coming here regularly. Hunting has continued since then, but since 1991 has been strictly controlled by the Namibian government. Their problems with men do not end there. The enormous shoals of sardines have long been a valued prize. Traditional fishing methods were not a threat, but with the invention of factory ships, the seas have been overfished. These marine mammals cannot hope to compete. The males arrive in October to mark out their territories. A month later, the females join them, and just a few weeks later give birth. In just 2 months, the water is full of seals. Seven days after giving birth, the females are again ready to mate. Once they have copulated, they swim into the deep waters where they remain for several days, feeding. During this time, the pups are left alone in the seal colony. The reduction in the sardine population is starting to affect the seals. The mothers are able to obtain less food, so produce less milk, and many pups die of starvation. On land, the seals are very clumsy. As they adapted to life in the water, they lost mobility once out of it. So whenever there is danger, they plunge into the sea, the only place they feel safe. In an instant, the water is full of thousands of seals who have suddenly recovered the agility they lost when they came ashore. Approximately 40,000 years ago, a new species appeared in the Namib, man. The herbivores of the savanna had conquered the desert, and so the first humans in the area were able to live from hunting. Today, the descendants of those tribes, the Bushmen, remain loyal to the same lifestyle which enabled their forefathers to colonize these lands. A group of men goes out in search of food. With the poisoned arrows they carry in their quivers, they can hunt large animals. But today, they are after something different. With long poles, the men are examining the burrows on the plain. The diet of the Bushmen includes 55 species of animals and 100 different plants. Hunting is the men's job and gathering is for the women. As they roam around the desert, they search among the sparse vegetation for fruits, berries, roots and bulbs. Not all varieties are good. Some are poisonous and others taste bad. Generation after generation, these women have learned to select only those that are edible, and today they know the vegetation of the desert better than any other tribe. The Bushmen firmly believe in the interdependence of man and nature. They take only what is absolutely necessary and are careful to preserve their environment. If they disturb what they call the natural order, the earth will punish them with all types of evil: drought, hunger, diseases, or death. All the wisdom of this tribe has been passed down from father to son over hundreds of generations to the present day. Their culture is now threatened by the general process of modernization in the country. New tools, new forms of dress, and new lifestyles may destroy this ancestral society. In the traditional dance around the fire, we can already see the effects of this trend. Some members of the tribe are wearing modern clothes. Who knows if, in time, pressure from outside will finally mean the end of a society which has managed to maintain its culture for 40,000 years. The first light of dawn and the Bushmen's festivities are coming to an end, while far to the north, at the opposite edge of the desert, other people are now rising in order to milk their cows. These are the Himba, the Oka people of the riverbeds. The most important thing in their lives is their cattle, and they are considered the best herdsmen in Africa. Everything is determined by the cattle, their social position, their daughters' dowries, food and clothes. Their dedication means that they cannot even remain in one place, and in the rainy season they move deep into the desert to take advantage of the grasses that grow at that time. In the dry season they return to be close to the permanent sources of water. Life for the Himba is hard. They must constantly attend to their cattle, give them water, take them to find pasture, make sure they do not stray off. Everyone, both men and women, must work, and only the children are excused. The Himba are a proud people and take care of their appearance. Their women wear a great deal of jewelry and paint their skin with fat mixed with reddish dust. Their culture, like that of the Bushmen, is changing under outside influence. The new generations will have to make a choice: follow the new trends or maintain their traditional way of life. The same way of life which made it possible for them to conquer the inhospitable lands of the Namib. The Himba are the last link in the chain of conquest of these lands. An epic story which began millions of years ago and which has brought life to the very heart of the Namib desert.